Hey everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to look at black-white tokens, black-white midrange, whatever you want to call it, in Standard, which is my favorite deck in Standard at the moment, and look at its sideboard guide for the top 11 decks in Standard. So these are the top most popular decks as I record this, according to MTG Goldfish. And according to what I've been playing against on Magic Online, and actually have played against it enough to say confidently this is how I want to sideboard against the deck. So let's jump right into it. If you want to hear about the deck, I have made a deck tech. I posted it yesterday. You should check that out on the channel. But here's the sideboard guide for black-white tokens. So first off is mono black midrange. So mono black midrange is not an aggro deck, right? Like most people talk about mono black like it's an aggro deck. The issue is it has small threats and also is able to play the mid-range game. Basically, you really want to get ahead on mana and make sure you answer their threats meaningfully and play your own threats, just like a normal mid-range matchup. Like I'm going to be saying this a lot against mid-range matchups. Like get ahead in tempo, play your threats, answer their threats. That's why we're sideboarding the way we are. So we're playing Graveyard Trespasser. It's sweet because it deals with their tenacious underdogs and is also a fine, difficult to answer mid-range card. And Sorin the Mirthless, which we are bringing in because it's a great, great mid-range card, great threat, etc., etc. We're bringing out Destroy Evils because there's basically nothing it hits in this matchup, and we're bringing out a Cut Down because the things that Cut Down hit are either recursive or quickly cannot be hit by it, right? Like the one drop that levels up and gets bigger. If you top deck a Cut Down, it's not an answer to it. It's only good the turn they play it, and I don't want to play that game. So we bring out some of our removal, and now we're just playing card advantage and threats, which is exactly where I want to be in a mid-range matchup where they have early threats. Against black-red mid-range, it's similar to mono-black, except they have less super early threats and play in the middle of the road game as well, and Fable and whatnot. We are actually bringing out our Destroy Evils because all it really hits is Fable, and that's not where we want to be. And we're bringing out our single Cut Down because it hits essentially nothing in the deck besides Blood Tithe Harvester. And we're bringing in our Sorins, and then the way we answer them if they get too far ahead is we're bringing in our Farewells. So a sort of similar situation as Mono Black, except we're not looking to trade early or anything like that. We understand that the game is going to be a little bit slower. Against Grixis midrange, we are bringing in... we are not bringing in Farewells. We're bringing in Sorins. We're bringing in the Graveyard Keepers for the reasons we brought them in previously. Just solid mid-range cards. Except we're also bringing in 4 Duress. So the reason for that is because this Grixis deck runs a lot of cards that you never want to see resolved if possible. They run Fable, they run a few Planeswalkers. They run Counter Magic. That Counter Magic is just a nightmare for our deck because we can get around it a little bit with Wandering Emperor, playing at instant speed, getting a counter, then untapping and playing our actual threat. But for the most part, the Counter Magic is really, really rough. So it can deal with some of their threats, deal with some of the things that we're a little worried about, but also put us in a situation where, we can make sure the coast is clear and resolve our just better threats. In doing so, we're taking out Cut Down. It basically only hits Blood Tithe Harvester as far as any meaningful cards. We're taking out Destroy Evils because it's just too narrow for cards that it answers. And we're actually taking out our tenacious underdogs. We don't care about the early threats. Often what happens in this matchup is you don't really have time to be blitzing tenacious underdog. This is not this isn't like a go till the end of time type matchup. Essentially what happens is, we duress each other, we play our cards, and eventually we're just windmill slamming haymakers, and the last person to not be able to answer each other's haymaker just loses. And so very often you can't even blitz it because, it doesn't have a good attack. Against Jund midrange, we're bringing in our Sorins, just like always. Our Farewells are exceptional against Jund midrange because when Jund gets going, they are way ahead. There's no chance in us getting back into it. And similar to Sorin, right, bringing our Graveyard Trespassers because they're just solid mid-range cards. Bringing out our Cut Downs, just like always. It feels like in these black mid-range matchups, bringing out Destroy Evils because it hits almost nothing besides Fable. Especially since their Thrag Test can't even really be hit by the Destroy, or literally can't be hit by the Destroy Evil. I guess it can hit the 4/4 token it makes. I don't actually know what the Thrag Test is called. And we're bringing out 2 Infernal Grasp. All their cards it's tough to answer with spot removal because often their cards replace themselves. or are 2-for-1s in and of themselves. So this like normal spot removal in Infernal Grasp and even Destroy Evil to some level and Cut Down just isn't very good. We'd rather just be playing our own Haymakers and own threats and own card advantage. Against true Esper midrange, again, as always, bringing in our Sorens. You know, we're bringing against every one of these black midrange decks. Bringing in our Farewells for, again, a similar reason as Jund is once Esper gets ahead, they're way ahead. And actually in this matchup, we are bringing in Destroy Evil. So the reason we're bringing in Destroy Evil is because Destroy Evil is way less narrow against Esper midrange. They're playing Wedding Announcement, which is super important to kill before end step. They're playing Rafines. They're often playing Shieldrids. There's just a lot more we can hit with Destroy Evil. And being able to snipe a Wedding Announcement, it can often just win you the game. We're bringing out Infernal Grasps. I don't feel like the spot removal is super solid. Again, a lot of the cards are 2-for-1s in and of themselves. And in bringing in, you know, the Destroy Evil, we don't want to get too flooded on this removal in a mid-range matchup where they can just win with Planeswalkers if they want to. And then we're taking out the 2 Graveyard Trespassers. It just doesn't really do much in the matchup. I guess it can hit Tenacious Underdogs or Denix. But if they have a Denic out, the card's just like kind of a tough to answer 3/3, which I don't really like at all. I do like keeping in the 1 cut down, just like reasonable removal. You know, it can hit a Rafine if we want it to. It can hit a Denix, so they have to spend mana bringing it back. And I just like the 1 of cut down. Having 5 removal spells, I think, is really good, especially when we're still running Invoke Despairs. We just don't want to overdo it. The mirror match. Orzhov midrange, Orzhov tokens. We love Destroy Evil, mostly for Wedding Announcements, also hitting the Shieldrids and, you know, hitting the AOs. It feels bad when you hit the AO with it, but you can. Farewell is really solid because, again, it can deal with, you know, Edgar. It can deal with AO. It can deal with Wedding Announcement and just hit the reset button, which feels really good. And we're bringing in Sorens because, again, this is a black midrange matchup. Bringing out cut downs because it doesn't really hit anything in the deck besides like tokens and like Tenacious Underdog, which you don't feel good about. Bringing out Infernal Grasps because, except for exclusively Shieldred, it just feels really bad to Infernal Grasp anything in this deck. And we're bringing out a single Graveyard Trespasser. The deck plays out really similar to Esper midrange. We're playing Haymakers against each other, and if it's not card advantage or a Haymaker, it feels really bad. There's nothing else I want to bring in, so we're leaving the 1 Graveyard Trespasser in, but Graveyard Trespasser is just like a card, and that's not where I want to be. Against Red-Black Sack, which might be the best deck in Standard at the moment, I'm not 100% sure. We're bringing in Duresses, being able to hit their combo pieces and removal and their fables and stuff like that feels really good. We're hitting our Graveyard Trespassers. You know, they're obviously like Red-Black Sack. I know they're normally sacking artifacts, but being able to hit the things in the graveyard is also really solid. And it's also just a great mid-range card. We're playing 2 Farewells. Often this deck, once the engine gets going, it's really tough to catch up, and being able to hit that reset button is super important because if the engine gets going with the anvils and all that stuff, it can just be over. Bringing out a cut down doesn't really do anything. You know, yay, killing 1/1 tokens. You know, it can hit the Blood Tithe Harvesters, but that's about it. It's mostly the blood tokens from the Blood Tithe Harvesters are the things that we care about, and doesn't do that. Destroy Evil hits essentially nothing in the deck besides Fable. And I don't like the narrowness of that, especially when we're often going to be duressing it. We're bringing out Infernal Grasp, similar for the reason we're bringing out Cut Down. It's just like there's nothing in the deck we really want to kill. It just feels really bad to be casting it against anything in the deck. And we're shaving a single Tenacious Underdog because what we want to be doing is answering what they're doing or getting ahead of the game with duress, and then just like have our Haymakers beat out their combo. And so the early game matters a lot less. Against the red aggro decks, we're bringing in all of the cut down, obviously. Being able to get rid of that having early removal for their early threats makes it so we can play the cards in our deck that matter. And we're bringing in Graveyard Trespasser. This little bit of life gain can really matter. You know, can hit Phoenix Chick or Squee after, you know, they die for a reasonable amount of value because, like, if they are going to be bringing it back, it's probably against this deck, especially Squee. And it's a fine body to block. You know, you want to block early, and often having more cards to play that you can block is really solid. We're bringing out Reckoner Bankbusters. We don't need, like any one of these Haymakers can win the game against Mono Red. We don't need to be spending mana on Reckoner Bankbuster, which often doesn't really do anything. And we're cutting 2 Invoke Despairs. We don't need that card advantage. It's not great removal. We're bringing in a ton of removal and not really bringing any out. The reason I keep in Destroy Evil is because it's fine against the 1 mana enchantment. It can hit Shivan Dragon if you really need to. Very often it can hit Thundering Raiju. And so I think having a few Destroy Evils left in the main deck is fine. I don't like the narrowness of it, but there's really nothing else in my sideboard that I would rather bring in. Against Red-White X Reanimator, we are bringing in our 4 Duresses. It's really important we shut down the Reanimation because then they just win. If we can shut down the Reanimation, we are a much, much, much better deck. So to shut it down, we're bringing in the 4 Duresses. We're bringing in the Graveyard Trespassers for Graveyard Hate. We're obviously bringing in the Unlicensed Hearse. And then because if we shut them down, they become just like a bad mid-range deck. We're bringing in our Sorens, especially to find cards that are reasonable mid-range cards. And we're bringing out our removal. We're bringing out the Cutdowns, bringing out Destroy Evils, bringing out Infernal Grasps, and we're actually going to be shaving. And we're actually going to be shaving 2 Reckoner Bankbusters. Often, what's going to happen is you're just going to be windmill slamming your, a threat or 2 after shutting them down, and we don't really need that card advantage. From the Bankbusters. We want these threats with card advantage because we need the game to end before they can get their feet back underneath them after we disrupt them with Graveyard Trespasser, Unlicensed Hearse, and Duress. Against a traditional control decks, like generic traditional control decks, blue-white, they are still floating around. Obviously, we're bringing in our Duresses. We're bringing in our Sorens, right? Planeswalkers are difficult to answer. Bringing in Graveyard Trespassers, again, difficult to answer threats. And we're just similar to the Reanimator deck. We're bringing out our removal. And we're actually going to be cutting 1 Tenacious Underdog. I realize Tenacious Underdog is really good in the long game, but you only need 1 for it to be good in the long game, so playing 3 of them is totally fine. And I would much rather just be playing our harder hitting threats and our card advantage. And I normally only do 10 decks, but the 11th deck that we're going to talk about is Mono Blue Delver because I just played a league and played against it a bunch, and it feels like a really interesting, rough matchup. Bringing out in our 4 Duresses. Duress is really important because the way they beat you is by playing a threat, and then you like tap out for a big guy like AO or Invoke Despair or Shieldred or something like that. And then they counter it, and then they untap, and their guy's huge, and they just like kill you. And they just like they beat you on tempo and beat you on mana, and being able to get those counter spells out of their hand. If we can resolve our threats, we're just gonna win. But they only need to counter 1, maybe 2 of our big threats to just win the game and run away with it. And we don't like that. We're bringing in Graveyard Trespasser. And alongside Graveyard Trespasser and Licensed Hearse, all for the same reason. It makes it difficult for them to play their Tolarian Horror, and it makes their Haughty Djinn smaller if we control their graveyard. And because if we're able to sort of stop them and play this removal spell game and stuff like that, Soren's really solid. It can also block their flyers and give us a little bit more time. We're bringing out Invoke Despair. We just don't want to spend 5 mana tapping out for something that isn't a threat and doesn't let us win the game. When if they counter it, when we spend 5 mana and they counter it and we could just die. Reckoner Bankbuster isn't very good because very often they're returning cards to your hand. You don't have time to play that long game because if they're countering your stuff, it often means you're being attacked as well. So just having more of that stuff that they're countering in your hand just like isn't very good because you're dead before it matters. I'm bringing out Edgar Tryndagrim. We want things that block, we want things that disrupt them, and we want things that just win the game. And Edgar doesn't do that. It's just a difficult to answer threat, and they actually answer it very easily by just returning it to your hand. So there you have it, the sideboard guide for black-white mid-range black-white tokens in Standard. If you want to see more videos like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on Twitch and other social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.